take is there. Secondly, we also need to look at how we can simplify the enrollment process and not make it very cumbersome so that it's easily, taken up. Another thing that we also need to do, which seems to be the elephant in the room, is that we need to increase funding for the NHIS, especially if you're talking about female-related problems, women-related problems, because if the funding is not there and they need to assess these programs, then it looks like the program itself is lost. So if we can increase funding specifically for female-related problems, then we should be able to make headway. Thank you.
Very good. This is a really critical point, particularly for the public sector to pay attention to, in order to provide that buffer and make it possible for women to have access to the kind of health care that will address their needs. Now, with regard to women being able to benefit or have access to the tools that will draw them out from poverty that was mentioned by Dr. Egemba, and also have that economic inclusion, there is this successful project we mentioned earlier on, which would have some very good learnings for us, and that's why we're going to Yetunde Fatogun to talk a bit about that particular program, which is ongoing, and let's see what lessons we can learn from that. So, Yetunde, the question to you is, when we looked at our Access to Finance Women's Economic Empowerment report, we learned that informal groups, like the one in the project that you are driving, they have given us the feedback of when there is more income coming into their own respective households, they feel more financially included. So based on what you have gone through with the Nigeria for Women project, can you corroborate, can you support that finding?
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, once again. I think, first of all, I'd just like to give a brief background about the Nigeria for Women project, because I don't want to assume everybody knows what the project is about. But Nigeria for Women project is the first flagship and the largest women economic empowerment project in Africa, being supported by the World Bank in collaboration with the government of Nigeria. First of all, we recognize that for women economic empowerment, it's important to know that it's not a short-term thing. It takes medium to long-term approaches, so we have to be very patient. It's not like, building a road or building a health facility. And we also need to understand that there are other sectors, and it's important that other sectors are involved in terms of implementation. What the project leverages on is a form of what we call, and I know some people had mentioned the VSLAs this afternoon. It's a variation of what we call the self-help groups, where women come together. First of all, come together to build the social capital before even the economic capital. The project started as a pilot in 6 states across the geopolitical zones to ensure that we are looking at all the different areas that women face challenges. I was having a conversation with someone this afternoon. You can have the best strategies, but I'm telling you that culture, or just a partner or a husband saying, "Madam, you cannot go for this meeting," whatever thing you've put in a report or a strategy document or an appraisal document will not move forward if she's not allowed to even step out of her house. So the project recognizes that for women to be empowered, there are different issues. My co-panelist here mentioned things around knowledge, access to capital, access to market, but there are also some other critical things. The institutions, traditional institutions, the religious institutions, the family, the in-laws, the norms that are also very important. So the project also tries to approach it with these different components: building social capital, influencing social norms, giving them access by making them form the social capital before they become the women affinity groups. And that is where they get the economic empowerment and the economic capital. They come together, they save together, they interloan among themselves. And normally these are women that banks would not even look at, oh, these women are in the rural area. But you'll be amazed to know that as of June 2024, these women have saved about $3.1 million. I didn't say naira, $1 million. These are women, and just across 3 states in 22 local governments in Nigeria. And based on the success of this program, it's been scaled up to 30 states in Nigeria. If we're talking about data, and I'll just give maybe 2 examples. I'll give some from the impact evaluation, because one of the things that we're trying to do on this project is that apart from access to livelihoods, we also want to be able to show as a case study to say that based on this, if you are able to empower women, these are the gains. We've seen improvements in gender norms. Interestingly, the men are even more receptive in our impact evaluation to show that they are also amenable to their women working. And I know a lot of us generally will just think, oh, okay, maybe the men don't want their women to work. But things are changing. The economy is not even making men to only want to do the work alone. On the project, when we first of all started, only about 18% of the women, and we had about 450,000 women, had access or had bank accounts and NIN, national identification numbers. As of June 2024, for the pilot project, 88% of these women have access to bank accounts. We understand, and I know that, my financial inclusion gurus here will tell you that it's not just about having money in your account, but you need 50,000 in 3 days. Are you able to call for that fund? We've also used that Women Affinity platform as a platform to address other development challenges. So instead of just going to one woman to say, oh, have access, Nonso talked about, health insurance. About 32,000 women and their dependents have been linked to state health insurance on this project. You can talk about, I can go on and on and on, but I think this will just sum up. Maybe if I have some time, I can still talk about some of the successes. So barriers such as social norms, where you see a lot of women in Poda that are not allowed to be involved in an economic opportunity. Based on the support of this project, they've been able to do that, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yetunde. We can all see the passion, especially now that you're seeing outcomes, you're seeing results.
Absolutely.
And one thing which you have mentioned, which obtains within the group, is the level of awareness is raised. So I would want to touch on that, and I would want to go to Sophie Mills to talk about the literacy component. So Sophie, from the perspective of, Africa-wide, the global perspective, we'd just like to find out, education, digital and financial literacy are significant, in fact, the most significant drivers of women's economic empowerment in Nigeria. This came out of the report that we published. So how can we, from your experience, enhance women's education, digital and financial literacy to ensure that they're better equipped to make informed financial decisions?
Hi, thanks, for the question. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that financial and digital literacy, broader education, these are really essential tools for engaging in a digitizing economy and a digital economy. If you don't have that, then it is very, very difficult to benefit from a digitizing economy, from new livelihoods that are opening up, or the way in which existing livelihoods are changing. But it's been really hard, I think, globally and across the continent to find a sustainable way of rolling that out. So we've seen different ways of trying to integrate that. Personally, I think it's a public good and it should be available. To be more precise for your question, we've seen some good success through national financial inclusion strategies. So where government regulators have taken on gender within financial inclusion strategies and have made the delivery of financial education a critical pillar in that. That has been really successful in reaching rural communities, for example, which might otherwise struggle to have those benefits. So the work that the FSD network has been doing with FSD Uganda, for example, we've seen some really, really strong outcomes there from government's involvement in that. I think just want to sort of caveat that it's really important that the regulator fully understands why they are doing this, that this is not just a tick the box exercise. In some cases, we've seen a little bit of perhaps a misunderstanding where in conversations with the regulator, where we've been talking about whether women are being reached with these initiatives, the regulator's been a little uncomfortable about being seen to prioritize women, which kind of suggests that they haven't completely grasped what we mean when we talk about gender and inclusion. And then the second success that we've seen has been on the supply side, where FSPs themselves have understood that if they want to market their services, their products to women, they're going to have to meet women where they are. And they're going to have to understand that some of those customer acquisition channels that work for men do not work for all women. So, you know, what we can think about there is how FSPs build greater consumer trust. How do they protect customers? We know from research in some East African countries that a lot of women, not all women, but a lot of women are worried about fraud when they start to engage on digital channels, whereas men may be less concerned about that. So how as an FSP, how as a regulator, do you address some of those gender-specific constraints, and how do you get these touch points within the life cycle of a financial product? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So indeed, that does make sense. The entire cycle that the woman would go through in accessing financial services, to look at how there can be more enlightenment even on issues around fraud. Because we've seen the headlines recently, and that can scare individuals and make them lower their levels of trust in the formal financial services space. So let's go back to the agric sector. And I'd like to come back to Aisha, and the question for you, connecting this question to what we just discussed about building trust for women in financial services. How can the agricultural sector work more closely with financial institutions to create tailored solutions that enhance financial inclusion for women in farming?
Right. So the reason why our smallholder women farmers gravitate towards the informal groups is because they see added value in it. From my group, I'm able to get access to finance, I'm able to get information on inputs, I meet my customers. We have to revamp our agric desk officers, FCMB, not to call, well, exactly to call you out. We have to revamp. Financial support from our institutions, commercial institutions, should not only be about financial support. It has to be a conduit where we are able to push technology adoption, which in this world now we can't do without. It also has to be able to push through access to market.
Excellent. We appreciate that. So I know Friday you would have something to say in that regard, but let's just pivot right now and move on to hear from Yetunde and what we'd like to look at. And Yetunde, we know that there is a volume of information to share and experiences, but we'll just request that you just give us a snippet, a taste, so that we can go to the World Bank for more. So the question for you is, from your perspective, what would you say is the most pressing need for women in Nigeria today, and how can the different sectors, so we have 5 different experts on the panel, how can there be collaboration to resolve those challenges?
All right, thank you very much. I think I wouldn't say there's the most pressing. I think everything is almost becoming a state of emergency, and looking at the woman as an individual, ensuring that she has voice, she has agency, looking at the institutions at the community level, traditional rulers, religious leaders, looking at the policies that we also have, and also looking at things around financial inclusion, access to capital, access to markets, all this, access to livelihoods, digitization, all these are key in terms of ensuring that we address these issues. What I would say in terms of collaboration is that, and maybe I'll just use Nigeria for Women as an example, as we scale up the project, instead of having the normal steering committees that just work in silos that are domiciled in one ministry, there's what we call a multi-coordination sector where different agencies, depending on the priorities of the state and what the women need, would be part of that committee to ensure that in terms of driving women economic empowerment agenda, we use a multi-sectoral approach to address this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So multi-sectoral approach, and then avoiding silos, and then looking at each geography, each state as unique. Yes, there are peculiarities taken into consideration. Well, let's go to Sophie. And there is something which we found out in our report, which was around the average income being earned by women. So our report revealed that the majority earn below 55,000 naira, which is now lower than the national minimum wage based on what was approved by the federal government. So how can, from your experience, women leverage their entrepreneurial spirit and also their access to mobile phones to drive sustainable economic empowerment?
Well, it's not just a woman problem, right? It's not just about how women use their phones to increase their livelihoods. I think that overall the trends that we see are really positive. Adoption of devices is higher in younger groups, so we can expect to see, as you know, over the coming years, an increasingly digitally literate population that is very able to engage with those tools. But I want to make the point that a mobile phone, a cell phone, digital channels are just a conduit to a financial service or some other kind of service, and whether that service is appropriate for their needs is actually what matters. And what we see in the work that we do across the network is that very often, no, it actually isn't, meeting women where they are, as I said in my last answer. So we're interested in making sure that finance is available so that women can exercise choices in their lives, financial and non-financial choices, and also make business decisions. So in order to get there, what we've been testing is a lot of gender intelligent product design. So working with financial institutions and with regulators, because the regulators need to be on board, to really understand specific women client segments and what do they need, which value chains are they working in, what kind of cycle of working capital do they require. And the phone is just a conduit to that. I give you an example, a couple of examples. Collateral is a huge issue, as we know. A lot of women across the continent, we've been doing research in East Africa, in Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. We know that the majority of retail banks want collateral. They're doing collateral-based lending. We also know that due to normative reasons, it is very difficult for women to own land, to own assets. So immediately there is a contradiction between the product offering and what a large section of the population is able to provide. But we know as well that women are using their phones to transact. So we're exploring how do you use transactional data to provide alternative credit scoring so that you don't have to rely on traditional collateral, for example. But that requires FSPs to make the investment, and it requires regulators to be comfortable with that kind of product. I think we're also just touching on some work that we're doing in Mozambique with FSD Mozambique, which has really been around understanding a female client. And an urban woman, a rural woman, they have very different experiences. We know even within one country the geographical differences that we can see. So it's not straightforward enough to say we're going to design for women. We have to say which women are we designing for and do we actually understand them. At that point, the digital device becomes useful because it is linked to a product. And this is not just about finance. We see this for health as well. I also want to make the point that I think that there is a great deal of work that needs to be done still around understanding women's life cycle needs and how this provides a lot of opportunity for financial service providers as well. I know that there are discussions over the next couple of days around health. And I think there's some really interesting developments at the moment in linking digital, finance, and healthcare. And then I just want to sort of make the final point that this isn't a woman problem, this is a gender problem. There are a number of instances in which we see normative constraints. I think we need to reflect on the way in which we raise our sons and our daughters, because if a daughter is raised not to think about how to invest her money, not about how to start a business, not about her savings, but if her brother is raised that way, then obviously the way that they interact with financial institutions, the way that they interact as business people is going to be very different. So I think understanding that normative and cultural context in our societies is also really key to making sure that women are able to actually harness all these tools that we're making available to them.
All right, thank you so much, Sophie. A word you use which is understanding. So understanding women's life cycle needs. But let's go to understanding their health needs. So let's move on to Dr. Egemba. And the question, we'll just love you to give us your response as concisely as you can, which is, given your background in the health sector, how does access to reproductive health services, including family planning and maternal care, influence women's economic empowerment in Nigeria? We'd love to hear from you on that.
I think, first of all, we need to understand that the lack of access itself can severely impact a woman's life. Because when we look at the global burden of disease, for instance, 1/3 of it amongst women of reproductive age are reproductive issues, reproductive health issues. And that has to take center stage when we are forming national economic development policies, for instance. It has to take center stage. It has to be a form of priority. Because even if we look at the economic returns, so to speak, according to Family Planning 2030, states that every $1 invested in reproductive health actually gives you back $120. So that should be enough reason, because if a woman can make decisions about her own reproductive health care, then it's easier for her to make decisions about her career, easier for her to make decisions about her life, easier for her to make decisions even about the size of a family. So family planning, for instance, right? Reproductive health issues, for instance, issues that are specific to women. When we are developing economic policies, it has to be part of the things that are looked at as a matter of, that. And then, if we're also collaborating, which is also part of what this conversation is about, so the private health sector also has to ensure that access to these particular services are easily accessible. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And so it's really important to recognize what leads to what. So reproductive health and overall health well-being being catered to would lay the groundwork for proper economic inclusion.
Yes,
and lastly, to wrap up, Friday, you have a chance to respond to what was said earlier. And we'd just like to get your parting thoughts, your takeaways with regard to how we can have inclusion.
Yeah, just to respond to Dr. Aisha, partnerships and collaborations definitely help. Financial institutions can't do it alone, and that's what we've realized. So for instance, we're working with a couple of institutions to create add-ons for our customer. I'll give you an example of what happened in Elisha. So we realized that women get some breaks in between and are unable to attend to their businesses when they are pregnant, when they put to bed, and stuff like that. So we approached Women's World Banking and Hygeia and created a product that was bundled with our loans, such that when a woman goes to the hospital for medical care and stays at the hospital for days, she gets something in return. So that's an incentive for her to seek health care from the right source. This woman, was sick for like 10 days. And this is a woman who took a loan of just 50,000 naira. And for the 10 days she stayed in the hospital, she got 100,000 naira, from insurance. So this is the kind of impact that we try to create with collaborations and partnerships. And I'm sure that, financial institutions can take a cue from this in trying to support women.
Thank you very much. So we've had a very, very insightful discussion, and would want to just bear in mind some of the key points that came up. Designing for the women, taking note of affordability, recognizing cultural nuances, recognizing also that social capital begets economic capital. Governments focusing on gender and not making it a tick-the-box exercise. Meet the women where they are. Protect women against fraud in our product design. And also ensure that it's gender intelligent, understanding the women's health, understanding their life cycle needs. So I would like to say a big thank you to our esteemed group of panelists. I'd like to thank Aisha Hadeja, Dr. Egemba, the Aproko doctor, and I wish we had time so you can explain why that is the case, that lovely alias. Yetunde Fatogun, thank you so much for giving us the World Bank perspective. Sophie Mills, thank you so much for bringing us a global view as well. And Friday Wokolo, we appreciate what you are doing, setting the pace within the financial services industry about designing for and around women. And also thank you to the PIC and the NESG for making this gender summit possible and this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing conversation and very eye-opening. If we could just take pictures quickly. And I must just say as an aside, I noticed that our Aproko doctor sat for over 40 minutes and he didn't drink water. How many of us noticed? He broke the code. Aproko doctor, what happened? But fantastic. Thank you for the enlightenment, helping us to be aware of our health. Once again, okay, let's allow them to take the pictures. Once again, please let's put our hands together for them. Fantastic work.